Okay, it's about a minute. We can kick things off. So, hi everyone. My name is Akhil, and I'm the co-founder of Green Story. And welcome to this very special webinar series on the new normal. The object of the series was to really help anybody that's in the eco-fashion space navigate the climate that's come around with COVID-19, and to hopefully come out stronger as a result of all of this. And I'm very pleased to host this great panel today. And joining us are 4 leaders in the eco-fashion space who will be talking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how companies in fashion can align themselves to it. This is a particularly important topic given the impact of COVID-19, and the SDGs have been pretty much referred to all the time in all 4 previous panels we've had so far. So just to give you an idea for what the SDGs are, and our expert Kerry will go into this in a little bit. So these are the 17 UN SDGs. And if you have any questions during the panel, please feel free to type them out in the question box that's there on Zoom, and we'll get to them after the discussion. And if you do want to take part in the discussion online, use the hashtag #NewNormal or tag us at Green Story Inc. And this is pretty much our handle across all social media accounts from Instagram to LinkedIn. Just to introduce myself quickly, I come with 13 years of experience in the sustainability space, having worked on carbon offsets, consumer sustainability, and corporate strategy over the years. And I co-founded Green Story 5 years ago because I really want to help consumers make more sustainable choices. And that's our vision at Green Story, to enable every consumer to ask, what's my impact before they make a purchase so they can make greener, more sustainable choices. As a company, we work with brands ranging from startups to global giants to measure the impact of their supply chains and visualize it for customers. And on the right, you'll find a really quick example of what we do. This is a product page of one of our clients, No Nasties. We have calculated the impact of their organic cotton items, compared it against a conventional item, and shown it at point of sale through clear, arresting infographics. And I would like to thank everyone on this great panel that's joining us today. Moderator today is Kerry Bannigan. Kerry is the founder of the Conscious Fashion Campaign in collaboration with the United Nations Office for Partnerships. She wears many hats as a social impact event creator, producer, and entrepreneur, curating global events and initiatives that advocate sustainable development. With the Conscious Fashion Campaign, Kerry is engaging leading global industry stakeholders to commit to the achievement of the UN SDGs. And on top of all that, Kerry was also the founding member of the SDG Media Zone in 2016. She now serves as the executive producer to the zone in partnership with the UN Department of Global Communications. We couldn't have asked for a more qualified host for this panel. So it's all yours, Kerry.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. And just to echo, I want to welcome you all to this panel that is called How Companies Can Align Themselves with Sustainable Development Goals, co-hosted by Green Story and the Conscious Fashion Campaign. I am Kerry Bannigan, founder of the Conscious Fashion Campaign. Don't need to go into much more. I had to thank you for that introduction. Today, I am joined by Irene Jonkman of Yumeko Amsterdam, Brianna Kilcullen of Anact, and Selina of Recloseted. Now, before we start the discussion, I'd like to ask each of our panelists today to introduce themselves and their work. Irene, could you please start?
Yes, I can. Well, I'm Irene. I'm Impact Manager at Yumeko. Yumeko is a bed and bath company in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and we are an online player, so we sell well, bedding and bath stuff to the Netherlands, Germany, and Belgium, and all our products are well, sustainable as possible. So, for example, the cotton we use is all GOTS certified, and where possible also fair trade. Well, that's about Yumeko.
Thank you, Brianna.
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today, and I hope everyone's staying safe during this time. I'm the founder of Anact, which is short for an act of kindness, an act of goodwill. Our simple act was to develop a sustainable towel better for all people on the planet. We were funded on Kickstarter in September 2019. We're now available online for purchase, and we really just believe in the SDGs and aligning our impact with global goals because we're a global industry. And so we're super excited, or I'm super excited to be here today.
I look forward to delving into more about where you've come so far since launching. So thank you. And Selina?
Hi everyone, my name is Selina. So nice to be with you all today. I hope you're all being healthy and staying well. So my name is Selina. I'm the founder of Recloseted. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada. And we're a consulting agency that's dedicated to righting the harmful fashion industry. And I know that sounds like a very lofty goal, but there's 3 ways we do that. So the first one is we launch more sustainable fashion brands through our Conscious Label Launcher program. We also help existing slow fashion brands scale through our business consulting, and then existing fashion companies, we work with them to be more environmentally friendly through our sustainability consulting. So yeah, really looking forward to the discussion today.
I'm looking forward to your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we delve into the questions and discussion, I do just want to give a quick overview on what the Sustainable Development Goals are, or as referenced, the SDGs for the purpose of this conversation. Not everybody is familiar, so you'd seen the poster of the 17 goals that Akil had showed earlier. These are a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. In 2015, countries adopted the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development and its 17 sustainable goals. Now, these were created and adopted by the United Nations, but it's very important. And one of the reasons for joining this conversation is they're actually for the people, the businesses, the governments, and the organizations, because without everybody taking them on board and engaging with them, the 2030 Agenda will not even be possible. The Sustainable Development Goals address a range of challenges, whether it's now as we're sitting in COVID, pre-COVID, things that were going on, and post-COVID that we'll have to address together. And these are anything related from poverty to inequality, climate, peace, and justice. The goals interconnect, and we have to make sure we leave no one behind. And with that, that is why we need to look at the 17 goals, but under that, there's actually 169 targets. And we'll get into how each of our panelists as individuals, different businesses, and where they are going, have looked to align to them as a framework, whether it's reporting or how they're going to goal set in their businesses, and how they've moved forward to make their own collective action towards change. So Brianna, I'm going to kick off with you. How did you come across the SDGs, and why was this framework what you decided to work with?
Right. So when I first came across the SDGs, I was working at Under Armour and I was in their sustainability department, and we were having I was having a lot of issues defining sustainability. So whether was it blue sign, was it fair trade, was it picking a recycled fabric, what did that mean and look like? And being the point person and the conduit to people's questions, I would get so many different definitions of what sustainability meant to them. And so that really made me think, my definition had been human rights and social, but it was clear there was other definitions. And so I was super fortunate. One of my mom's best friends sent me a video that basically was a 20-minute overview when the SDGs were published. And she said, I know you struggle a lot trying to understand this, so I think you should check this out. And as soon as I watched it, it completely made sense to me. And I connected with it because I felt like it was this holistic perspective and quantitatively driven and globally ratified. So those being in this global industry, I felt like we were inclusively thinking about the planet and not just perhaps our country or our brand. We were also using numbers, which I think sustainability can so often be this very emotional or, even sometimes feminine tree hugging type of feel. And instead it broke it down in a way, especially in business, that it could be equated to the same way you would run your sales numbers. So I love that. And then also that it included social and environmental, and it was based off of what were the actual issues globally. So those were all the reasons that I was really attracted to them. And then I immediately embraced them and wanted to always align my work and the organizations that I've worked at their impact to those goals.
Thank you so much for that. And Irene, I've seen you smiling and nodding to a lot of what was said there. So I'm going to jump over to you. How did
Yeah,
you come
true.
across the SDGs, and why was this framework what you decided to work with?
Well, Brianna's search for, well, a picture sounds a bit familiar because last year, I started only last year at Yumeko as impact manager. And it was also because the company was growing and we needed to get focus and vision. Not that we didn't have it yet, because the company started with the idea, what the things we do, we want to do good, but what is doing good? And I knew the SDGs already a bit as the next step after the Millennium Development Goals. And first I was really impressed, like, wow, 17 goals, how do you manage that? But at Yumeko, we were also like, okay, we want to do good for people, we want to do good for the environment. And I think the SDGs, when they came across, it was really, all the 17 goals were like building bricks, and you can mix and match a bit. It sounds like fun, but more like you do the things you're good at, and how from that perspective you can work on different goals at the same time, actually. So that's why they're very valuable for us. It's also a kind of communication tool, because from your own business you're doing the things you're good at, but the development goals really show the bigger picture, actually. So that was
Very
for us the
interconnected.
reason. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And Selina, anything to add to that on your part?
Yeah, I just say that, both of them put it so great, but in terms of sustainability, it can feel really overwhelming and daunting. Like there's so many problems and so many issues. And I just found the SDGs to be a really good grounding point. It's kind of like a proven roadmap. Like these are our 17 priorities. This is how we should all work together. So I've always found that really helpful. And I think both of them are kind of touching on that too. So that's been really helpful to guide my business and also help other clients too, because I know it can feel really daunting and overwhelming.
Well, I'm sure as well for you, Selina, it's actually helped you translate and give examples to your clients as you want to help them build their businesses towards sustainability. And something we talk about the Conscious Fashion campaign is how the Sustainable Development Goals actually provide a unified language for the industry to come towards. And it's come across already with so much what you've said. So thank you. Now, Brianna, we heard Irene say they're 17. And at first when she saw them, it's like, oh, wow, what do we do with these? And yet she then started realizing they're very interconnected. So what sustainable goals are you focusing on most right now as a brand? Did you have a selection of primary to then secondary? Are they interlinked? And could you give us advice for the brands that are listening here, how you choose to focus?
Of course. So I think, and I just want to echo Selina's thoughts with how I think the SDGs are so powerful as they're a North Star. And I think that for me, being a business owner, so often, right, when you give your deck to an investor or give it to somebody to take a look, they want to know your market opportunity. So they're expecting to say, here's your industry, what does that look like? And rarely do you ever get to do that with sustainability. But I do think the SDGs allows us to do the exact same thing that we would do with any other component of the business. So I just wanted to share that as something that I believe is really important for brand starting, is including that in your deck. But for us, so the textile industry, we know certain things it's notorious for, right? Water consumption, not paying workers fair compensation, the climate, the energy for logistics. So those were common themes that I feel like I've addressed or had to address in the brands I worked with before. And then being a startup company who doesn't have a lot of resources or dedicated staff to focus on really where's our impact, we had to work with factories that are mom and pops that don't really have the resources or don't have the big brands that are asking them excuse me, to invest in their social and environmental practices. So our leverage is in the fiber selection, which is why we choose hemp and why we choose organic cotton, because that allows us to be able to ensure the environmental standards in which we're choosing without having to ask the supply chain partners to go out of their way to accommodate us. So I would say that it's less, maybe there's definitely things that I see as a huge impact for us, but it's more so as here we are as a business, and what, based off of our business platform, can we have the most impact on without driving anyone insane or having a factory partner say, well, you're not 80% of our business, we don't see the growth yet, we're not going to invest in that. So that's my recommendation, is it's really around that material selection when you're building out your bill of materials and your tech packs and your product, that you can have the biggest impact. And so really, from what I have experienced in the textile industry in combination with what we can do, choosing hemp reduces that water consumption, and choosing organic cotton reduces the use of insecticides or pesticides. So those were the, at one point down the line, I would love to do more on the social side, but really choosing the environmental fibers and is where we've had the most leverage at this time.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And Selina, I actually want to come over to you, where you advise brands and you're seeing them probably look at these 17 goals and mean, well, what does that mean for me? Or I can do all of them. And we know that people need to start somewhere. It was actually nice, Brianna, saying they're the North Star to look to. I haven't heard that reference before, but I think I might borrow it and credit you for that, because that's actually a true point. So Selina, talk to us here. How do you advise brands on how to focus on the SDGs?
Yeah, I think Brianna did a really good job summarizing it, but it would be just, it's so personal, right, to the founder and to the brand. And, you know, she's focusing more on the material side and the environmental side. And for a startup, it can be so overwhelming to have to sit here and think that you have to work towards all 17. And so when I work with brands, especially if they're smaller, we sit down and pick 2 to 3, because I think that if you make such a big impact on 2 to 3, but you still take into account the others, you can really drive the needle, and it's less overwhelming, especially if you have smaller budgets. And then as you get bigger, you get more support and you have more of a community, then you can tackle more. But the thought of doing all 17 as a small business, I know can be really overwhelming. So yeah, it's a really personal exercise. We sit down with the founder and, you know, or the founding team, and really understand what their values are, what's important to their brand, and then we go from there. So yeah, so a lot of clients do care about the social impact. So we work with them to find conscious production partners, for example. So they like to tackle those ones. Or other brands really care about the environmental impact, kind of similarly to Brianna. So we work with them on that. So yeah, it's very personal to the brand, and I think it should be.
Yeah, and I think as well, it also has to be set what's realistic to your business. It's not unnecessary to see what your competitors are doing, because it might not make sense for you, and you actually might not even be able to implement them and then make a difference. So it was pointless. I think it's very important to really look at what makes sense for your guiding business principles and then select from there. Irene, so you actually went back and took us back to a moment in time talking about the Millennium Development Goals. So I'm intrigued to hear from you. What's your journey been in aligning your business to the Sustainable Development Goals from when they launched?
Well, actually, Yumeko is a bit, was started before the development goals, and I came after, so it's an interesting timeline. But our journey towards it was your question, right?
Say that again, you cut out.
Our journey towards aligning, yeah. Well, actually, it's again a bit like Brianna, because the starting point has always been make good products for everyone who is involved in the chain. So we started with organic cotton, I think the core of that is really, you're not using pesticides, so the water is clean, and that's good for the environment. And at the same time, the people who work with those materials have a healthy and workplace, to say so. So that was actually our starting point. But then again, we also wanted to do good for animal welfare, because we're in the bedding industry and down is a much used product material, which is actually not really in the development goals and millennial sustainable development goals. But yeah, so actually our core business is really climate, and then you see the spillover effects, that it's also very good for well, people. They're not working with pesticides anymore. There's less, how do you say, sickness and etc.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you in a moment, Irene, because I'd love to hear your comment on this next question. But Brianna, how are you using or planning to use the SDGs as you continue to grow as a measurement framework for your impact?
The way that we're using it is really, our first step is partnering with Green Story. So that was a way in which, being a startup, we could start to measure our impact, and with each purchase that we're making, and then equating that to the SDGs. So it's not really any more complex than that at this point in time. I'm always open to, if there's tech-friendly apps or ways in which we can do a better way of connecting that. I mean, I do like calculate how many jobs we've created. We're based here in Jacksonville, Florida, which again is a lot of people aren't familiar with the SDGs, I know in general, but especially in the South in the United States. It's, you know, we're doing a lot of education around it. So calculating it in typical ways you would maybe calculate your impact, which is job creation and community outreach, but then in addition into the product impact through Green Story, and then creating reports that we publish and we'll publish on our website this year that show what we've done in connection.
Great, thank you. For those that are not familiar with the Green Story tool, especially to a brand like yourself, can you give an example of the things that it does calculate and show the consumer about the product?
Sure. And I should also preface, so I met Akil and heard about Green Story when I was working at Prana. And so that was a couple of years ago, and immediately clicked what the work that they're doing and the need for it, because there's so much greenwashing. And so to be able to weed that out and to show customers that they can be able to understand what one brand is doing versus another brand, instead of that brand's marketing team being able to spin it as such, was really important to me. So before I started developing our towel, I worked with Akil to make sure the impact was going to be worth what was going to be better than what was currently on the market, because I didn't want to go forward with it if it wasn't, which is something else though that I've thought about in terms of maybe criteria that we use for new brands coming up before going to market, which I know is not capitalism, but is just something to think about. And with the Green Story, so they do the LCA, the life cycle analysis. So the key criteria was ensuring the water consumption was less than a conventional cotton towel in comparison to our product. And then in addition, the energy emissions were critical for us to calculate. So there's 4 different pieces of criteria that I'm going to blank because now I'm nervous and on the spot, but they're on our website, so you can check them out. And yeah, that was our key component. And I would say for any future products that we would develop, I would have us do the Green Story LCA and impact before going to market. And I would recommend that others do that as well. So that it also gives you that transparency and authority to really market what you're selling because you've done that work.
Thank you for sharing that. Irene, can you add to that how you use the SDGs as a measurement framework?
Well, we also make use of Green Story, but that's since March this year. And before, we already tried to do some things ourselves, but to be honest, it's quite difficult. So when I heard Akil's story and he said, oh, we're a team of 3, I don't know how many people, worked 3 years to develop all these LCAs, I thought it's good to join because it's impossible to do it on yourself in the time we wanted. So before we measured the water use for organic cotton, but that was really on well, global averages. And the nice thing about Green Story is really on your own chain. So what is the water use in India for our parts then, instead of what is the global average? Water use is really important for us because it also has the spillover effect on the community around, that you have, well, clean water available and you don't get sick if you drink it or use it to wash your clothes. And further, we also try to measure, which is a bit more difficult, how many farmers we support based on the, well, actually we use it, our sales numbers there for that. So based on the amount of products we sell and we know the weights, we can convert it to how many, well, people we support with selling their stuff.
Thank you. Selina, I want to move over to you, but with this question that I have, I've actually seen that a panelist, an audience member, has asked also. So I'm going to tie that in, Rashi, if you're still there. Selina, I was going to ask you, what advice do you give on how a business can manage the intersection of the SDGs? Coming back to our point where we were saying, you know, let's be realistic and pick a few. Now, we've also got to then be considerate of what if so many people ended up going with only a certain amount and forgetting about the others, and can, when focusing on one and not being aware of the targets and indicators of another, can it cause damage? How do you navigate that with brands and can give advice to businesses listening here today?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's something that a lot of brands navigate with. So, you know, I talked about picking a few and focusing on them, but that's not to say that you completely ignore all the others. You still have to be cognizant. So one of the things we do with clients is, you know, once you pick your focus, you do something like a cost benefit analysis, and it doesn't have to be super formal. It can be just, you know, back of the envelope. But, you know, if you move forward with one decision because it's aligned with one SDG, you should still look around and see how it affects others. So I'll give you guys an example. We once had a client who was really passionate about life below water, you know, really wanted to use natural fibers because he was really upset about the whole microplastic situation, which, you know, makes sense. It's awful. And so he really wanted to make a collection made out of, you know, great materials. And so very passionate about that. And he started going down the route of bamboo, like a bamboo rayon. And then when we started working together, we kind of educated him about how in China, some parts, the bamboo is kind of harvested haphazardly. We were not really sure if they're very sustainable and if they're using those methods. And, you know, that's kind of against SDG 15 a little bit, right? The harvesting of things. And then the bamboo process to rayon also uses a lot of chemicals. So then that's also not great either. So in that situation, the, I guess, benefit kind of outweighed some of the costs. So, the cost outweighed the benefit rather. And so what we did was found alternatives for him. So kind of similarly to Brianna, we decided to move forward with a hemp organic cotton blend instead because, you know, it's a great fiber, it doesn't use a lot of water. It's great for consumers too. They can feel good putting it on their skin. And that's just an example of, even though he was so focused on one, you should still do a quick cost benefit analysis. And then if it's not looking favorable, then see if there's any alternatives as well. But I'm not going to sit here and say that the world's perfect. It is really gray and it's very tricky. So there's going to be some trade-offs, but you'll just have to, again, go back to your values and really see if it's aligned with your values and if you're comfortable with it at the end of the day, because there's always going to be trade-offs.
Thank you. That's very insightful too, because it is true. It's that domino effect. Some really do interconnect and help each other, but you cannot ignore looking at the other set too and what that's going on and what that means, especially when it comes to labor and the supply chain in general, when you might be picking something up on another goal. So Brianna, I want to touch back on what you were saying about how you use the calculator to talk about the impact for the consumer, and I'm sure it really helps them on their decision. It does for me when something can be calculated and you actually realize you already thought you were making a difference by shopping with an impact brand, but to then see it translated and to be easy to digest and very quick information that you can actually also tell people about, I think is really interesting. And I love that from your site. But as a brand, how did your journey begin? And please share with other businesses listening here, how do you showcase your alignment, not just with the Sustainable Development Goals, but how do you message impact and sustainability in a place where you have a gorgeous website, you've really gone forward with natural and neutral branding to stand for what you're wanting people to buy into, let's be honest. And so how do you navigate that and do that balance? I would love to hear how you're showcasing something that's sellable and savvy and nice that people with great taste want, whilst also ensuring that that impact messaging is carried across.
Of course. So one of the things I came to realize after working on the brand side and working with our marketing teams is that as much as all of us on this panel, everyone here listening, want to believe that people are going to pick the most sustainable choice, ourselves included, the reality is you want a product that performs and you want it to solve problems. And so for me, it was so critical to show that we were providing sustainability without a sacrifice and that we're utilizing Earth's natural resources to make a product that's going to be better for people and the planet. And so that's what we really want to lead with, and then say, in addition, here's your impact, so that there's no feeling that somebody's sacrificing, some attribute that they would have normally gotten by picking another towel, by choosing us because we are sustainable. So I always recommend that sustainability is that extra icing on the cake for the customer. I think that's what should drive us as founders, and that should be, sustainability is survival. It's about having the needs to meet the present and being able to have enough resources for the future. It's nothing, that's how we look at it, is communicating it as simply that. And then what those resources look like fall in within those 17 buckets. So communicating that to our customer, and that we have their back and that we're doing that work, and then we're providing them that product. And on our packaging, we have our impact score, which is one of the attributes I would say our customers love and feel good about. And on social media, we get reposted all the time. We have on our website, obviously, the integration with Green Stories, so you can see our overall impact. And then constantly, communicating out why sustainability, what we're doing, why our customers should care, inspiring them to take simple acts to address their own way. And the SDGs is another thing that we try to do. But I think the crux of it is have an awesome product, and then on top of it, communicating the sustainability messaging. But I think to lead with the sustainability and not have the best product on the market and expect that your customer is going to continue to support that, I think does a disservice to the sustainability movement and dilutes the work that we're doing.
Thank you so much. That was a lot to take in, and each a true pillar. No, it's true. And actually, Irene, I want to lean to you to add comment to that as somebody working in a brand. What do you do there, from communication, whether it's to packaging, to on-site, to your website, and especially now where everything's so heavy with digital, even pre-COVID, the power of social media, the way that was growing was rapid. So what does that look like for you?
Well, that's an interesting question, because we're a bit in a shift. I think it's a bit, how do we say, global shift, but in the Netherlands, it's very, something of the last winter, it feels, that also brands of which we think, well, are you that sustainable? They promote themselves being very sustainable. And in the beginning, it's actually, again what Brianna said. We're very aligned. The start of selling your product is, it's a nice product. This is where you want to sleep under, and under which you want to wake up. And if that's not okay, people won't come back. And there you are with your sustainable products in your warehouse. That's also not really sustainable in the case that, well, if it's there, nobody gets inspired. So the last years we mainly communicated about the softness and the niceness, is that a word? I don't think so, of the product. But now we see other companies also coming up with, well, we're doing better cotton, or part of our product is okay. So that's actually moving us also towards that direction, and to be more, well, actually proud on the product we make. Because in the old days, it sounds like very long ago, but sustainability was also a bit, how do you call, hippie thing? Not really cool, but more something for
taboo. People didn't know how to translate it or what it meant, or like they thought it was very bohemian, but you're saying hippie.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't sure entirely, again, because the definition was lost. No one understood what that meant because it's so complex.
No, exactly. And now you see that sustainability actually can be also a nice product. And I think that's really, well, the key, the combination.
Thank you. Selina, coming over to you more on the brand consultancy side and what you see in helping brands grow and where they're looking to go now. Do you think COVID-19 is going to play a role in getting more brands to work in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I will say as a whole, every industry and just the economy in general definitely has been hit by this, and not to downplay that at all. I think the fashion industry especially, it's been quite heartbreaking to see some mills and factories, you know, not being sure of when and if this will blow over and if they'll be okay after this. So that's been, you know, kind of difficult to navigate. But the reality, I think, is with a lot of brands right now, they're kind of in survival mode, and they're trying to figure out how they can bring more sales in, how they can maintain their production and profitability. So I would say that's probably at the forefront. But because it is slower, I find that a lot of brands are now having the time and space to strategize. So I think in that case, there is an opportunity to layer in the SDGs and the sustainability. And I will say that a lot of fast fashion companies right now are sitting on so much inventory, it's ridiculous, and they don't really know what to do with it. So maybe, hopefully, that spurs some light bulbs that's like, oh, maybe we should rethink how much we're producing, and maybe we should rethink how we're going about it. And maybe instead of quantity, we should focus on quality. And I'm hoping that some of this starts to trickle in. I have seen BOF actually do a couple articles saying that smaller brands, more indie brands, if you will, with shorter supply chains have better control over this situation. So I don't know, maybe we'll see a couple shifts, and I'm hoping that, you know, once these brands get through it and the industry gets through it, we can focus again on just making better product that does good for the people that wear it and also our environment.
Excellent, thank you. Now I'd like to hear from each of you on this. Brianna, I'm going to kick off with you. What is your plan going forward to work with the Sustainable Development Goals? How are you, and I'm very aware we're here sitting in the wake of COVID-19, and maybe your plans 8 weeks ago for where you wanted things to go are a little different, but is there anything you could share with us that maybe you inspire to head towards your North Star as you move forward, and what that could look like as some next steps?
Sure. So I think, you know, for being a startup, and this is my first startup experience, and being excited to go to market, and then COVID happening and wondering, oh my gosh, how, what, where do we begin? I think it's actually a very exciting opportunity, because I think that our industry is largely attached to brick and mortar. And so those larger brands that Selina's mentioning that are in that fast fashion model are now tied up trying to figure out how to survive given the model that they've operated under. So I think it's a huge opportunity for brands that want to be defining that the future of fashion to go. And it's going to be online, it's going to be digital, it's going to be, and for us, I think I'm grateful that we're not tied into brick and mortar, that the real estate of getting on Fifth Avenue in New York City is now for the taking, because nobody's fighting for that. It's going to be online, and the barrier to entry is a fraction of the cost. So the ability to go to market and to communicate the SDGs is just huge. So I highly recommend working with the Selinas of the world, getting that and going forward online and communicating that as a united front within our industry, because I think that it's no man's land, and it's going to be who gets in front of the customer as this upcoming months, the rest of the year, that will define what the customer knows and how much we can educate, because I think that's a core component. So I think it's scary. I was listening to Brene Brown last night, and she has FFT, which I apologize in advance for what I'm about to say, but like first fucking time. And I feel like that's just like where we all are, and like personally and professionally. So it's just time to FFT in regards to SDGs, in regards to our industry, to really get out and talk about what's been going on. And I think it's also really important that people know how broken it is. We run on an 18-month lead time, and we forecast for consumption, not to solve problems. And we're creating on this very linear model instead of a circular. So I think that panels like this, that Green Story is hosting, and yourself, Kerry, I'm so grateful for, because this is what's going to get out in front of our peers, in front of our customers, and be able to shape what this industry looks like.
Thank you. Irene, can you share anything from a brand perspective, what you are looking to do and navigate? Are you even there yet on what you hope to do going forward with the SDGs?
Well, actually the goal I like most, it sounds a bit simple, but is the last one, the 17th. And that's about partnerships.
My favorite too, it's up there. But
yes. And I think that's really important, because to be honest, my colleagues and me are sometimes a bit in the sustainability bubble. And then you forget that actually only 1% of total cotton production is organic. So there's 99% to go, I should say. And we're getting more, we're getting more out. So now I have one colleague who is cooperating with a hotel. Well, not the best time at this moment to work with hotels, but we're in the sleeping business. And well, just the more people, and actually not only customers, but really rather bigger companies, if they can team up with us, we can, well, share the story and, well, make the world a better place.
And just in a comfy night's sleep and very good.
Exactly.
Product.
Wake up happy.
But collaboration, it seems like, is key for you going forward.
Yeah,
Like
that would be great.
you can grow and take it. Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you. And I do think COVID is teaching us that we kind of are all in this together, and to bring our assets and our resources together is incredibly powerful. And it does need to happen in our local communities in order to have that global transformational effect, I think. And Selina, I'm interested to hear your perspective, because not only do you run your brand, so what are you going to do with your agency going forward with the SDGs, and how do you want to message it and that you hope your clients will?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this. I think we're just going to continue doing a lot of what we're doing, using it kind of as a North Star that Brianna was talking about. And I love how Irene's talking about partnership and collaboration. I think that's so important. But we're quite choosy with the people we work with, and we will continue to do, because we obviously want to help brands that do good, genuinely do more good. So sounds kind of cheesy, but you know, that's how we run our company. We're very choosy, very selective. And at the end of the day, another thing I'm really excited about is just spreading the message. You know, Irene talked about this, but we kind of are in a bit of a bubble, and there's so much, I think, impact to be had when more people pick this up, when bigger brands start paying more attention, when consumers start telling them that this is where the money is because I care about this. Like, I think that is a huge tipping point that we're kind of going towards. And it'll be interesting to see how COVID shapes this and pushes us towards that. But yeah, at the end of the day, just continuing to help clients with it, continuing to urge clients to also spread the message to the consumers so that we can get towards that tipping point, and really just using it as a grounding point because, yeah, like I talked about at the beginning, sustainability can be very daunting and overwhelming. So it's a really good framework.
Thank you all. I'm actually going to move over now. We've got different questions coming in the chat. Some questions were put in the Q&A box, and some people actually emailed questions in prior also. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just jump over to a few of these from the audience. And I would love to hear from all of you. And Selina, I'm going to kick off with you. Wakas from Pakistan asks here, maybe a bit of a tricky question, but which brand or even brands maybe do you think is following the SDGs in letter and spirit? And I think there maybe we can translate this to each of you is what are some of the brands, or maybe there's just one, and I just hope there's multiple, that you admire and you look at that might actually even be in a whole other sector to what you're doing, but what you like what they're doing and it's genuine and you believe. Selina?
Yeah, I mean, if we are in the industry, you know, for example, Patagonia has always been a brand that even from the start has done well by their values. And I think they're a brand that really understands what they care about, and they kind of emulate that through their marketing, and they also get consumers on board. So I think just in the fashion space, they're definitely a brand that I think touches on a lot of the SDGs. And outside of fashion, it's interesting. I would say that, you know, in the food industry, there's been a few interesting companies that have started thinking about their farming practices, their packaging, and things like that. So that's been really cool to see. I would also say that I've seen a few, at least in Vancouver, they're called Chop Value. It's a furniture store. And essentially they take chopsticks. There's so much like takeout waste from chopsticks, from sushi places, all that stuff. And they essentially, I'm gonna dumb this down, but they glue it all together. It looks great though. And they turn it into furniture. So that kind of upcycling that I'm seeing a lot of businesses practice, like that's so cool too. So yeah, like I think there are more businesses trying to genuinely do more good. And I think that the SDGs again are a good anchoring point for that.
Thank you. Brianna, anyone you'd like to mention?
This is so weird. No one off the top of my head brand wise, but a great organization that is Textile Exchange, and every year at their conference, they're always pushing the SDGs and have that, you know, tangibly around, and they attract such a global audience, and they're constantly growing that I think they do a great job in bringing together awareness on the SDGs. And then I was just thinking, like, external branding, they don't do the SDGs, but Reformation in LA is one of my favorite brands because they use dead stock fabric. And so, and they cut and sew in LA, and I just love their style. So that's a brand that I watch, but they don't directly use the SDGs. So now I'm going to have to do some research. And
they're very aligned though. They have their reports, and you know, this is the whole point, right? How do we get the fashion industry to be bridged with the SDGs, because so many people are championing impact and sustainability, and is there a way we can bring it all together to align to that unified language, right? And we're getting there bit by bit. Irene, is there any brands that you admire or follow across sector that you believe are true to the SDGs?
Yeah. In fashion, I really like the Armed Angels. I'm not sure if that's known at your side of the ocean. I think it's a German brand, yeah. And I think they're quite already for, well, quite some years around now. And they're not only making fair products, but also pretty products, which is, well, what we talked about before. And in the food industry, there is quite a cool one in the Netherlands. It's on chocolate. Tony Chocolonely, I don't know. I think, well, they're also in America since a few years. And they're maybe not explicit aligned with the development goals, but the founder, he, how do you say? He went to the police and said, I'm sorry, I did a crime. My crime is I bought chocolate, and this is made by people who don't get paid enough. So, well, to make a point, that's quite an introduction to start a brand, I think.
That's so interesting. I wonder how they dealt with him.
They said, sorry, that's not a crime.
And it is. It is.
Well, it is, yeah.
It's just not on paper yet. And actually, another question here that's coming, and I think it's interesting, especially around where COVID is making us sit and really navigate what we're going to do digitally, business-wise. So Matt asks here, and I'm assuming maybe a friend of yours, Brianna, but how can we better educate our society, especially our younger generation, on the importance of sustainability? Who would like to kick off with that one? I'm going to pick you, Selina, maybe because of your agency.
Yeah, sure. I think, yeah, so whenever possible, we should always try to spread the message and do so in a manner that is as, I think, like has as much substance behind it as possible, because like Brianna talked about, like greenwashing is such a thing, and we want to make sure we educate people with facts and we educate people with the right knowledge. And with Recloseted, we also do consumer awareness raising because it is a cause that I really care about. So we have a podcast, we have social media platforms, and you know, a lot of brands nowadays are on social, but I would just say that make sure that you try to give them the facts, but I never try to shove things down people's throats. Like we take the approach where we try to empower people, right? Like we give you the cold hard truth, you sit with it and you decide what you want to do with it. Because when someone decides themselves they want to make a change because of what they've learned, that's so much more powerful than you telling someone what to do. So empowering people, I think, with the truth and with the facts can really just try to get more people on board, and then they're motivated too to help spread the message.
Irene or Brianna, anything to add to that?
That's my dad asking the question, so we can consider the 65 the 65-year-old range is covered on this one. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really about the best way I've experienced change or can advocate is by you embracing it yourself and being willing to not just sit on a podium or say, hey, you should do XYZ, but actually asking questions and changing your lifestyle behavior. And then in those moments, being able to have a conversation. And I think that I hope that our school systems start to incorporate this as well, so that we're not just learning about how to, start a business, make money, but it's how do we design for end of life? How do we think about the impact that we're having on our planet, and then equating that to these larger goals. But I think a great connection is comparing the food industry to the fashion industry. And that's a very tangible way in which people can make that understanding of how their clothes are made, because we are fortunate in that we've been to factories, excuse me, we know what it looks like, but a majority of people have never been to a factory. And especially because outsourcing is so prevalent, most people won't have an opportunity to go to really understand what we're talking about and why we're passionate about seeing change in it. And so talking about food and the soil and making that connection, I think is a great first step in understanding that apparel is grown in soil, cotton is grown in soil next to food crops. You know, it has a process, there's ingredients in our product, and then we are what we eat and what we wear. So that's just another way that I think is helpful to connect.
And I also think it's interesting you mentioned there about the schools, because we're spending so much time trying to deprogram what is habits and what we've learned as we step into our adulthood. It would be so good if it was dealt with when we're growing up as our influence. Irene, anything to add?
Well, I think that are two beautiful answers already. And
well.
I think what I also like is when you tell the story, it's a positive one. So not the world is, it's a sad story, we all know, but that's not really motivating people to, well,
change.
To change and do something about it. So actually, I also really like the role Green Story is taking here in informing people about what actually is behind the product you have on your bed, in our case.
Thank you.
Transparency.
Yeah, transparency. Now, before I hand back over to the Green Story team as we come here to wrap up, I would love it if each of you could actually share with the audience resources on what you have looked to. Maybe it's associations like Brianna you mentioned, maybe it's some books, podcasts, blogs. Please do share what you look to when you're finding out more about the SDGs or just impact in general within your brand.
Am I kicking off?
No.
So one of my friends, Kestrel Jenkins, has the podcast Conscious Chatter. She does a fantastic job, of profiling different brands, speaking directly to the founders and the leaders in those organizations. Not directly SDG related, but she's a great resource to leverage. And trying to think, for me, I like always reading about the UN, just like knowing more about their work and what they're doing, and then understanding, so there's more authority, I guess, in promoting the SDGs. So I recommend understanding the UN's work outside of just the textile and SDG. And I know I'm going to think of some really good ones after this, so I will just share them.
I was going to say, we might need to share them afterwards because there's a lot of questions I couldn't get to either, just out of respect for everybody's time. But Selina, any resources that you could share?
Yeah, the Global Fashion Agenda, they put out a really great report every year. It's called The Pulse of the Fashion Industry, and in there's like really great stats. It really does take a pulse of what's going on, so that's always a great resource. I would say Business of Fashion is interesting to keep updated with as well. They're not as sustainable like focused, but they have been in recent years, which is interesting. So always just nice to keep up to date there. And then just self-promo. But yeah, we have our Recloseted radio podcast. We also have our blog on our website. So definitely check us out as well. And then I try to send out newsletters to our community just to keep everyone up to date. So if you're ever, too lazy, you can definitely leverage that too, because it's really meant to empower people again with information.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And Irene?
Yes, Brianna already mentioned Textile Exchange. I think that's a really cool source about, well, the name is already saying it, textile. And more in general, Sustainable Brands is a weekly newsletter. I think that's also the name of the organization. More in general with, well, interesting information and research things.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for your time and for sharing all your insights. That was brilliant. And there's actually quite a few questions here that I couldn't get to. So maybe Green Story could get them over to the panelists and send them out afterwards to the attendees.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be doing that as well. And I'd like to just thank the whole panel here. It was such an engaging and amazing discussion. And it's a great conversation on chat via the audience as well. So as a final point, what I'd like to say is, a lot of what we discussed was around marketing and really putting the messaging out there. And thank you for the shout outs for Green Story. And Selina, you're doing some amazing work around that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Akil. Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks both. Bye-bye.
Bye.